It began in the early autumn of 1903, in the quiet farming community of Van Meter, Iowa, a town so small, people rarely locked their doors and gossip spread faster than the trains that passed through. But as the nights grew colder, something strange began to stir beneath the surface of that ordinary Midwestern calm. The townspeople didn't know it yet, but they were about to face something that would shake their sense of reality. A creature, an event, a terror that would haunt Iowa's history for over a century. On the night of September 29th, 1903, local businessman Yugi Griffith was making his way home just after midnight. The streets were empty, and the faint glow of the gas lamps flickered through the heavy mist. Then, without warning, a blinding beam of light shot across the dark sky. At first, Griffith thought it must be a searchlight from a passing train. But the light wasn't moving like a machine. It hovered, silent and deliberate, before gliding over the rooftops and disappearing behind the Mather and Gregg hardware store. Griffith stopped in his tracks, unable to process what he had just seen. It wasn't a lantern, and it wasn't man. The beam was too focused, too intense, and it came from something that seemed alive. Shaken, he made it home and told no one. In a town like Van Meter, where reputation mattered and superstition was scoffed at, it was better to stay silent. But the following night, that same light returned. This time, it was spotted by Dr. Alcott, the town's respected physician. He had been asleep in his upstairs room when a piercing glow flooded through his window. Half asleep and startled, he reached for his revolver and stepped outside. The night was eerily still. Then he saw a strange, humanoid shape perched on the rooftop of a nearby building. It wasn't human. The creature stood upright, its body massive and angular, and from its forehead shone the same blinding beam of light. The doctor froze as the creature turned toward him, the light cutting through the mist like a knife. In a moment of terror, Alcott raised his gun and fired 5 times. The shots echoed through the street, but the figure didn't flinch. It didn't fall. It simply vanished into the night, as if the bullets had passed through air. The next morning, word began to spread. Gunfire had been heard. The doctor claimed he had seen something impossible, and though most dismissed it as fatigue or imagination, the seed of fear had been planted. What Griffith saw the first night no longer seemed isolated. Something was haunting Van Meter, and it was getting bolder. By the third night, a local banker named Clarence Dunn became the next witness. He was guarding the bank after rumors spread that strange lights had been seen near the building. Dan, being practical and skeptical, thought it was just a prank. He brought his shotgun and waited through the night. Then, just after 1 a.m., the air went cold. From the distance came the same blinding light, weaving slowly through the fog. It stopped at the top of the bank and glowed brighter, so bright that it cast sharp shadows through the windows. Dunn aimed his shotgun and fired point-blank through the open window. The blast shattered glass and rang through the silent streets. But when the smoke cleared, nothing. No body, no blood, no evidence of anything human, yet the light remained, as if taunting him. Then, slowly, it rose upward, floating into the sky before shooting off toward the abandoned mine on the edge of town. A place locals already avoided because of strange noises and unexplained tremors in the earth. Dunn dropped his gun and fled, trembling as the light disappeared once again. By now, the people of Van Meter were no longer laughing. Something was happening. Something that defied logic, faith, and fear itself. And as dawn broke, they gathered in hushed conversations outside the general store, trying to make sense of it all. Some said it was a ghost. Others whispered it was a demon from the mines. A few believed it might be an undiscovered species, something ancient, awakened from beneath the Iowa soil. But whatever it wasn't done. That evening, the light returned again, brighter, closer, and unmistakably deliberate. It was no accident of nature, no trick of reflection. This was something alive, aware, and watching. And this time more people saw it. One of them was O.V. White, a respected store owner. He stepped out after midnight and looked up to see the creature perched atop a telegraph pole. Its wings, yes, wings, spread wide like those of a bat, and from its forehead the blinding light pulsed rhythmically, as if it were scanning the town. White, in sheer panic, fired his rifle. The bullet struck the creature, or Siametu, but instead of falling, it leaped effortlessly across rooftops and vanished toward the mines. Once again, the next morning, the townspeople gathered, shaken but united. Too many witnesses now. Too many gunshots and sleepless nights. Even the skeptics were silent. What once sounded like a joke was now the center of every whispered conversation. 4 or 5 nights straight, something had stalked the town. It had been seen by businessmen, doctors, and shopkeepers. People not prone to fantasy, and each time it escaped unharmed. Whatever this thing was, it was intelligent. It was immune to bullets. And it seemed drawn to the old abandoned mine on the edge of town. By the 5th night, armed men decided to end it once and for all. They would confront the creature at its lair. They gathered rifles, lanterns, and courage, and made their way toward the mine entrance, unaware that what waited for them below would defy explanation and leave behind one of the most terrifying mysteries in Iowa's history. The air was sharp and cold as dawn approached, and a strange silence settled over the outskirts of Van Meter. The old abandoned mine, once a place of laughter and labor, now stood as a wound carved into the earth. Its entrance sealed in shadow and surrounded by fear. Rumors had spread that the light, the creature, whatever it was, had been seen entering this very place. For the townsmen of Van Meter, there was only one way to end the terror. Confronted head-on, a group of 5 men gathered near the mine's mouth, their faces pale and grim in the flickering lantern light. Among them were Clarence Dunn, the banker who had fired at the light from his window, and Sid Clark, a respected businessman. Their hands shook as they reloaded rifles and whispered prayers under their breath. No one spoke above a whisper. Every step toward that mine echoed louder than it should have, as if the earth itself were listening. The mine entrance yawned open like the mouth of something ancient, a pit of blackness that seemed to swallow light. The men aimed their lanterns forward, but the beams barely cut through the dark mist curling from within. A foul stench, like sulfur and decay, drifted from the depths. It was the same odor several witnesses had described earlier, sharp and unnatural, burning at the back of the throat. Then came the sound, a deep, resonant noise, like the flapping of enormous wings. It reverberated through the mine shaft, shaking the loose stones and filling the men's hearts with dread. The noise was followed by a low, echoing growl that didn't sound like any animal known to Iowa or anywhere else. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then, in the darkness, 2 pinpoints of light appeared, not reflections, but glowing eyes. The same piercing beam that had haunted the town now stared directly at them from deep inside the mine. "Light it up," Dunn shouted, raising his shotgun. The men fired almost simultaneously. The gunfire cracked through the air, echoing down the tunnel, and the smoke filled the entrance. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling. The lights flickered. The creature screeched a horrifying, high-pitched sound that made the ground tremble. It wasn't dying, it was angry. Suddenly, another shape moved in the darkness beside it. A second set of glowing eyes appeared. There wasn't just one creature, there were 2. The men stumbled backward in disbelief. Their shots had no effect. The creatures, both massive, winged, and almost humanoid, began to move toward the entrance. In panic, the group reloaded and fired again. The light from the creatures flared brighter with each shot, as if feeding on their fear. But then, just as the men were about to turn and flee, the creatures stopped. They didn't attack. Instead, they spread their enormous wings, and with a sound like thunder, soared upward through the mine's ventilation shaft. The light trailed behind them, swirling like fire through the air, before vanishing into the dawn sky. When the echoes faded, the men were left trembling and speechless. Their ears rang, their rifles smoked, and the sulfur stench clung to their clothes. No one dared to speak of it until sunrise. By morning, the entire town knew what had happened. The men who had gone to the mine were considered heroes, though not one of them wanted to talk about what they saw. The mine was sealed off permanently, boarded and buried under stone. It became a forbidden place, whispered about by generations that followed. The official story was that it was closed for safety reasons, but the people of Van Meter knew better. For weeks after the confrontation, the nights returned to normal. No lights, no wings, no sounds from the mine. The people slowly began to breathe again, though few walked the streets after dark. The fear that had spread like wildfire was replaced by cautious relief. The newspapers moved on, and the rest of Iowa soon forgot. But not everyone did. Years later, the story of the Van Meter visitor, as it came to be called, resurfaced in old archives and local legends. It was whispered that what the townsmen encountered that night was just a creature. It was something ancient, something from deep within the earth, disturbed by human greed. Some believed it was a protector of the land. Others said it was a demon guarding a forgotten passage beneath the town. Whatever the truth was, it had left a mark that no one could erase. Decades passed. Van Meter grew, but the mine remained sealed. Children dared each other to go near it, and old-timers warned them not to. The ground, they said, still trembled sometimes, grew slightly as if something down there still moved. And occasionally, when the fog rolled thick over the town, a few swore they saw a faint beam of light sweep across the sky, silent and searching, before fading once more into the darkness. For years, the story of the Van Meter visitor became little more than a whisper in the wind, a local legend that older residents spoke of with uneasy laughter, and younger ones dismissed as superstition. The mine was sealed, the weapons had gone silent, and Van Meter slipped back into its familiar rhythm of farming, trade, and Sunday church bells. But behind closed doors, there were still some who didn't sleep well at night. The men who had faced the creature at the mine rarely spoke of it again. Some even refused to be interviewed. They aged, had children, and grew old in that same town. But their eyes always darkened when the topic resurfaced. The fear they had seen, or perhaps the thing itself, never really left them. Time dulled the terror, but not the memory. By the 1910s, the story had already begun to fade, passed down more as a cautionary tale than a fact. Yet strange occurrences continued in quiet ways. Livestock found mutilated, low vibrations in the ground, and rare, unexplained lights reported by farmers in the outskirts. None were as dramatic as that autumn of 1903, but they kept the legend alive, like embers under ash. It wasn't until decades later, when researchers and local historians began revisiting America's forgotten mysteries, that the Van Meter case returned to public attention. One of them was Chad Lewis, a paranormal investigator who stumbled upon century-old newspaper clippings describing the events. The articles were detailed, consistent, and credible, written by journalists who had personally interviewed witnesses. Lewis quickly realized this wasn't a myth born of drunken talk or small-town gossip. It was documented history. According to the records, multiple respected citizens had described the same glowing, winged being. Each account matched in eerie precision. The horn-like beam of light on its head, the smell of sulfur, the indifference to bullets, and its retreat to the old mine. It was, by all measurable standards, one of the most well-documented cryptid encounters in American history. A case that predated the Mothman sightings by over 60 years. The more researchers dug, the stranger it got. The descriptions of the creature didn't fit any known species. Not bird, not bat, not human. It seemed to possess intelligence, even curiosity. It didn't kill anyone, but it had no fear of confrontation either. Whatever it was, it acted with a kind of deliberate intent, almost as if it were studying the humans who watched it. Then came the question no one could answer. Why Van Meter? With this tiny, quiet, Iowa town, in the middle of the cornfields and rivers, far from any coast or wilderness. Some believed the answer lay beneath the ground. Old geological surveys of the region revealed that Van Meter was built over a network of ancient limestone caves and mining tunnels. Some natural, some man. The town's founders had dug deep in search of coal and rock, often hitting mysterious air pockets and caverns that stretched for miles. Miners sometimes reported strange noises, low humming, echoing moans, or sudden gusts of warm air that felt alive. Many of these accounts were written off as imagination or fatigue, but when placed beside the events of 1903, the connection felt undeniable. Could something have lived in those caverns? Something ancient that surfaced only when disturbed, researchers began to theorize. Some suggested it was a prehistoric species, trapped underground for millennia. Others leaned toward the paranormal, a spiritual or interdimensional being, perhaps drawn to the mine's energy or the magnetic conditions in the region. One theory stood out among the rest, the idea that the creature was not alone. The miners had encountered two beings that final night, and both had retreated deeper into the mine. What if there was an entire nest or colony hidden beneath the earth? The sulfur smell, the noise, the tremors, all could point to an ecosystem or a phenomenon not yet understood. As the story gained traction again in the early 2000s, journalists and filmmakers traveled to Van Meter to investigate. The townspeople, now several generations removed from the original witnesses, spoke of the legend with both pride and unease. Some treated it as local folklore. Others insisted their grandparents had seen something real. A few even claimed that lights still appeared over the old mine site on rare occasions, faint beams sweeping the horizon before vanishing into the night. For those who believed, the Van Meter visitor was never gone. It was merely sleeping. In 2013, a small team of researchers returned to the mine's location, now mostly reclaimed by nature and blocked by layers of earth and debris. They used ground-penetrating radar and thermal cameras to map the area. What they found was unsettling. A massive hollow cavity beneath the town, extending far deeper than any recorded mining tunnel. The space was cold, empty, and inaccessible. Yet faint, electromagnetic readings pulsed from within, as if something below was still active. No one could explain it. The modern-day investigators left with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. The Van Meter case wasn't over. It had merely entered a new chapter, one where history, legend, and science blurred together. The story that began with a mysterious beam of light in 1903 was now a century-long puzzle, one that refused to be solved. And yet, something about the town itself still felt different. Locals spoke of uneasy dreams, strange static interference on radios near the mine, and the occasional low hum that rolled through the ground during quiet nights. It was as if the silence of Van Meter wasn't empty. It was live. The days that followed the second disappearance blurred into one long nightmare for the people of Van Meter. The air itself seemed thick with fear, and the once vibrant little town had fallen silent. Curtains stayed drawn even in daylight, and the sound of children's laughter, once the heartbeat of Main Street, vanished completely. Farmers stopped working after sundown. Men who had once laughed off the strange dailies now kept shotguns by their bedsides. Even the local pastor devoted a sermon to it, urging the townsfolk not to fall prey to Satan's tricks. But deep down, everyone knew this was no trick. Something was out there, watching, waiting. One night, near the old abandoned coal mine on the edge of town, a group of men gathered, their lanterns flickering in the cold wind. They had grown tired of living in fear. Leading them was Clarence Dunn, a respected banker who refused to believe in monsters until now. They carried rifles, revolvers, and a kind of grim determination. The plan was simple: find whatever this thing was and end it. But as they stood near the yawning mouth of the mine, they realized the air had changed. The smell of sulfur, thick and suffocating, rolled out from the darkness. Then came the sound, a low, guttural hiss, echoed from deep within. It wasn't an animal sound. It was intelligent. The men raised their guns, just as something burst out of the mineshaft wings, snapping open like thunderclaps. The creature's skin shimmered in the lantern light, its enormous eyes glowing like molten coals, and to smell that same rotten, chemical stench filled the air. They opened fire. Bullets tore through the night. The creature screeched, a sound so loud it rattled the bones of everyone present. But even after several rounds, it didn't fall. It soared upward into the blackness, disappearing over the trees. The men stood trembling, ears ringing from the gunfire. The nightmare wasn't over. Moments later, another sound rose from the mine, softer, smaller, but eerily similar. The men froze. A second creature crawled into view, smaller than the first, but with the same glowing eyes and leathery wings. One of the miners screamed, "There's two of them!" The rest bolted, dropping their weapons and sprinting back toward town. By the time the sun rose, the mine was silent again. But the men who'd been there would never forget that moment. The bravest among them swore never to go near that place again. And from that day on, the coal mine was sealed shut. That night, the townspeople gathered inside the church, their faces pale and weary. Clarence Dunn stood before them, his voice unsteady as he recounted what they had seen. When he finished, there was only silence, heavy, suffocating silence. Finally, the pastor spoke. "Whatever that thing is, it isn't meant to walk this earth." And so, the people of Van Meter made a pact. They would not speak of it beyond their borders. They would not provoke it, hunt it, or even mention its name. To do so, they feared, might call it back. But even as the years passed, strange things continued to happen. Livestock vanished without a trace. Shadows were seen gliding across the moonlit fields. And sometimes, late at night, those who lived near the old mine swore they could still hear that piercing screech echoing through the corn. Decades later, when the mine was reopened for geological surveys, the workers reported an odd phenomenon. Their equipment malfunctioned near a certain depth. Compasses spun wildly, and batteries drained in seconds. One man swore he felt a gust of heat from deep within, as if the earth itself was breathing. Some said it was just methane. Others believed it was something else, something alive. The story of the Van Meter visitor, as it came to be called, became part of local folklore, but only whispered in hushed tones. A creature part man, part bat, part machine, born of the earth, or perhaps of something far older. Those who dared to research it found unsettling parallels. Similar winged beings were reported in the late 1800s in West Virginia. What would later become known as the Others pointed to ancient native legends of thunderbirds, enormous creatures that carried fire in their eyes and brought storms in their wake. Was it possible that the people of Van Meter had encountered something primal, something that had existed long before civilization? As the years turned into decades, the story refused to die. It lay dormant, just like the mine, buried beneath time, dust, and denial. But every so often, a traveler passing through would hear strange noises at night, or catch a glimpse of a shadow too large to be a bird. And just like that, the fear would return, the same cold, instinctive terror that gripped the town over a century ago. Because deep down, some mysteries don't end. They only sleep. The mine remained sealed, untouched, a gaping wound in the landscape that no one dared reopen. It was as if the thing had returned to whatever world it came from, leaving behind only questions, fear, and stories too unbelievable for outsiders to accept. Yet the evidence was there. Bullet holes still marked the walls near the mine entrance. Several men, all with reputations for honesty, swore on their lives they had seen the same winged beast. Clarence Dunn, the banker who led the defense that night, told his family the truth and instructed them to never go near that mine. He died years later, but his children said he never slept soundly again. In time, the story of the Van Meter visitor faded into legend, spoken of in hushed tones by grandparents on stormy nights. But for those who lived it, it wasn't a myth. They had seen the creature's eyes, smelled its sulfurous breath, and heard the unearthly cry that still echoed in their nightmares. Multiple law enforcement officers had signed reports attesting to what they saw. The journalist published his findings in a regional magazine under the headline, "The Night the Devil Came to Van Meter." It reignited curiosity across Iowa. Reporters and cryptid enthusiasts flooded into town, hoping to uncover new clues or remnants of the creature's existence. Some claimed to find claw marks on old stones near the mine. Others reported the faint smell of sulfur still lingering in the air, even decades later. A few even said they heard strange screeches at night, faint, but eerily similar to those described in 1903. Skeptics, of course, had their explanations. They said it was an owl, or perhaps a sandhill crane distorted by fear and imagination. Scientists argued that sulfur smells could easily come from decaying organic material near old mines. Logical, rational, but none of it explained the blinding light, the bulletproof skin, or the fact that so many witnesses, from bankers to doctors, described the exact same thing. It wasn't just hysteria. Something had been there. As modern researchers began to analyze the accounts, they noted a pattern. The Van Meter incident shared uncanny similarities with the Mothman encounters that would later terrorize Point Pleasant, West Virginia, in the 1960s. A winged humanoid with glowing red eyes, a creature associated with sulfur smells, mechanical noises, and electromagnetic interference. Was it the same species? Or was it something far older? A being that moved through time and space, appearing in moments of great human fear. Local folklore took it even further. Some believed the creature was a guardian of the earth, emerging only when humanity disturbed something sacred beneath the soil. The fact that it came from a mine, a wound carved into the land, seemed symbolic to ignore. Others saw it as something darker, a demon cast out from hell, drawn to human curiosity and greed. Whatever it was, the people of Van Meter knew one thing. The town was never the same after that week in 1903. Even in the 21st century, the story refuses to die. Cryptozoologists visit annually, paranormal investigators camp near the mine, and thrill seekers wander the cornfields at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary visitor. But for the descendants of those who lived through it, the story isn't entertainment. It's a warning, a reminder that the world isn't as simple as we pretend, that some things defy explanation, no matter how much time passes or how far science advances, and that maybe, just maybe, the visitor never left. Because sometimes, silence isn't peace, it's waiting. And on certain nights, when the wind moves through the fields just right, locals still swear they hear it, a faint, metallic screech echoing through the darkness. Not loud, not close, just enough to remind you that the story of the Van Meter visitor isn't over. It's only sleeping, somewhere deep below the Iowa soil, waiting for the right moment to rise again. More than a century has passed since that terrifying autumn week in 1903. The world has changed. Machines replaced horses. Skyscrapers rose where dirt roads once stretched, and the mysteries of the past have been buried under layers of science and skepticism. But in Van Meter, Iowa, one story remains untouched by time. A story that refuses to fade, no matter how many generations come and go. Today, the old mine is gone, collapsed long ago and reclaimed by nature. Cornfields now blanket the land, their golden stalks swaying gently in the wind. Yet locals still whisper about the spot where it all began. They say the earth feels different, they're heavier, like it remembers. Every few years, researchers return with cameras, sensors, and high-tech equipment, determined to capture something, anything, that could explain what happened in 1903. Some report odd energy readings. Others describe strange electromagnetic interference, phones and recorders dying in seconds, compasses spinning wildly, and a few, those who stay past midnight, say they hear it. A single, sharp screech, followed by silence so complete it chills the blood. Could it all just be coincidence? Could a century-old legend still echo through the soil of Iowa? Those who have studied the case in depth find one detail impossible to ignore. Every witness from 1903 described the same smell of sulfur and the same mechanical hum. Whatever the Van Meter visitor was, it wasn't just an animal. The sound it made, the light that surrounded it, Even the way bullets seemed to bounce off its skin. These were not natural traits. Some modern theorists suggest something far stranger. They believe the creature might not have been of this earth at all. Its movements, its luminous eyes, and its impossible resistance to gunfire. All hints of advanced biology or technology. Perhaps what the men of Van Meter saw wasn't a monster, but a machine. Could it have been an ancient entity, something that visits from time to time, drawn to energy or geological activity beneath the earth? Or was it something that came through a rift, a thin place between our world and another? Skeptics, of course, dismiss all of it. They argue that human memory distorts over time, that fear transforms owls into monsters, and that the sulfur smell was just natural gas. But even they can't explain how an entire town, farmers, businessmen, lowmen, all describe the exact same thing. When asked, one historian said it best: "You can't shoot at a shadow." But they did. And they kept shooting. Something was there. As time went on, the Van Meter visitor became more than just a local legend. It became a symbol of the unknown. A reminder that even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary things can happen. A festival is now held every year in the town, celebrating both the mystery and the courage of those who faced it. Visitors arrive from across the country to hear the story retold under the same autumn sky where it all began. At night, campfires flicker near the old mine site. People tell the story once more. The sulfur, the light, the screech that split the sky. Some laugh, others listen in uneasy silence. But when the fire burns low and the fields fall quiet, even the boldest among them glance toward the dark horizon, half expecting to see a shadow take flight, because deep down, everyone knows that legends are born from truth. The Van Meter visitor may be gone, but its echo remains not in the earth or the sky, but in the minds of those who dare to wonder. It is the whisper that tells us we don't know everything, that the world is still vast, still wild, still full of things science cannot yet name. And maybe that's why the story endures. Not because it terrifies us, but because it reminds us that there are still mysteries left in this world. Things beyond our understanding, waiting to be seen, waiting to be believed. As the night deepens over Iowa, and the wind moves through the endless fields, the town sleeps. But somewhere out there, in the quiet dark, the legend stirs again. Wings unfurling against the stars, the Van Meter visitor may have vanished from sight, but it has never truly left. It's still out there, watching, waiting, just beyond the light.